Welcome back, Charles.
Well, welcome back to you,
Right.
fearless traveler.
Well, it's lovely to see you again. Wonderful to have you here.
Likewise, it's a treat to be here.
I think everyone was missing Sunday with Charles, so we had to have this special Tuesday edition just to, fill in the gaps. So much has happened since I was over there in Las Vegas and California and Dallas, hanging out with Louis Gohmert and some of your favorite guys.
I think you should travel more often, because when you travel, lots of stuff happens.
It's true. So you're saying get the hell out of here,
Basically, of your own apartment.
Got it. Well, Charles, you've prepared some interesting material for us today. Where would you like to begin?
Well, I think what we could do maybe is, before we get into the slides, we could think about going through some of the recent developments, because there truly has been an enormous amount happening.
It's true.
Notwithstanding Hillary Clinton's statements that in recent moments, I think she said that all of this chatter about her and the foundation and the Russian collusion, all that has already been litigated.
What?
And it's been debunked, and it's a bunch of baloney. So how many different ways can you be wrong in less than a minute? I mean, it's amazing.
But it's not wrong. What she's doing with that is she's sending out a message to the people that listen to and believe her crap, and it's like advertising, they have their message. This is happening to me. Someone takes a message that's not true, like Jason is a Mossad agent, and without any evidence, without any proof, without anything backing it, just like Hillary Clinton is, they just keep putting out that message. And so many people hear it so many times that they just think it's true.
Yeah, except I think in this case, and far be it from me to give advice to either party, let alone the Democrat Party, but in this case, you have a nutcase having replaced, I'm not talking about Hillary now, I'm talking about Tom Perez having replaced yet another nutcase, Deborah Wasserman Schultz. You have
as the chairperson
of the DNC, you have a large number of Bernie supporters. I think they took a knee in the election and didn't vote, many of them, and this behavior, I think, is further upsetting many Berniacs. So you have a troubled brand to begin with, and now you have somebody who's a two-time loser, right? And lost against an upstart, Barack Obama.
Yep.
Lost against an even more of an upstart in Donald Trump. I mean, she can go on and on and on about how everybody hates Donald Trump.
She couldn't beat him.
Yeah, but she couldn't beat him. I mean, that's just so you're sitting there, and as far as these parties are concerned, both parties I think are tired brands, but both parties have a business model, and that business model is you have to sell hope. You have to sell that a given politician will, I don't know, get you closer to the promised land, and then when you're selling hope, you're getting contributors to send money into the central headquarters of either the Democrat or Republican Party. And what Hillary is doing by this behavior is, I think, ensuring that even less money goes to the Democratic Party. So as far as the Republican operatives who do, some of them talk to me, they're delighted. They, run, Hillary, run. I mean, keep going, baby. You go, girl.
Well, I'd love to see her lose again.
Exactly.
Hillary 2020.
2020, 2024.
The Hindenburg could be the poster for the...
Yeah.
Charles, so many people I speak to who are, let's say, under 40, feel like the two-party system, it's like 8-track cassette tapes, Why do we need that anymore?
Well,
when you get somebody like Donald Trump, who's famous from TV, can run. Like, honestly, if Kanye West, Oprah Winfrey, and Michelle Obama ran, it'd be a toss-up as to who would win.
Right. So I think what's happened is that, I'm certainly over 40. The generation that today is taking hold of industries and becoming accomplished, in some cases athletes, over-the-hill athletes if you're 40, that generation grew up in a very different world than the one that I grew up in, and can accomplish. Look at what you could accomplish here with not a gigantic media empire behind you, the crowd that you can speak to, the interaction you can have with it, and this idea that you would rely upon a political party to do anything in 2017
Mark Zuckerberg could run for president and everybody on Facebook would vote for him.
Right, everyone remaining on Facebook.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, it's so last millennium to be wedded to this traditional party approach. And yet Hillary, that's the only thing she knows.
Perhaps we'll see it collapse pretty soon.
We can only hope.
So what have we got today in terms of slides? You know what I also wanted to talk to you about? During the time I was away, they had the Jeff Sessions hearing, the Senate hearing.
Right.
And they brought out a lot of things sort of in an official way for the first time during that hearing. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Why don't you just refresh my recollection on which topics?
Well, I mean, they mentioned that, you know, the uranium thing, I think, was mentioned during that for the first time. That wasn't, you know, on internet news or, I mean, that New York Times article came out in 2015 and then sort of nobody said anything about it.
Right. Yeah, so what's happened here, I think, is that, and I think we had the first Zero Hedge piece, the Grassley, not that one.
Sorry.
The one to the left.
There we go. That's Fox, right?
Yeah. So I think that's what you're referring to there, that
yes.
Senator Chuck Grassley and his staff are incredibly able. And the thing I have always liked about Chuck Grassley is that he is interested in making sure, to the extent possible, that we actually have justice fairly administered in this country. So if a Republican, and he is a Republican, if a Republican breaks the rules, breaks the law, he's very quick to pounce on Republicans, he'll pounce on Democrats. And he's, I believe, 80 or 84 years old or thereabouts, so he's at a stage in his life where, you know, he's not thinking about politics, he's thinking about, honestly, what's right for the country, and he works extremely hard.
I would say he's not even buying green bananas.
Well, let's hope he's got another 20 years, but at least. But anyway, he had, I think, had a hearing scheduled with Sessions when this news broke out about the Uranium One story being a lot deeper than everyone had first assumed. Now, hats off to Sarah Carter of Circa News and John Solomon and his team at The Hill, because they are true investigative reporters, and they have broken something that is massive here. When I was never really much of a paid journalist, but when I did write for the Washington Times, John was a big boss, and I remember writing at the time the Secret Server was revealed, which I want to say is in the February time frame of 2000. Was it 15 or roughly around there?
Yeah.
I remember then, and also with the Uma Abedin stuff, revelations about her 4 jobs, which is something that Grassley has been probing for a long time.
Yeah.
Thinking, on top of all else with Fast and Furious and Benghazi and everything else, that what we may have here is the death of the mainstream media. We may have, as Newt Gingrich said recently, the biggest set of scandals in the history of America by orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
And the mainstream media, those pompous people, you know, from Jake Tapper and, you know, you name it, Andrea Mitchell, I'll pick on CBS, NBC, ABC, you know, all these coddled celebrities.
Fake yapper.
Who believe that, you know, they orchestrate the news, and through the prism of their eyes and ears, you know, they reflect underlying reality to the great unwashed masses. These people going from inside meeting to what, a press conference to on the set.
Pizza parties with John Podesta.
Yeah, well, maybe. And, you know, they missed all this. And, you know.
Did they miss it, or were they actively covering it? I mean, look at what's going on in Vegas. When Laura and Mike Tokes and Jake Morphonius and I were at the police press conference, someone from the crowdsourced community had recommended that I approach the mainstream news reporters and say, hey, why don't you ask this? Why don't you ask that? I didn't even get a chance to do that because they came over to us. Someone said to Laura, we love what you're doing because we can't ask these questions. We'd get fired because MGM Casinos, that's all the advertising on local television stations in Vegas.
Well, that's really the breakdown, I think, of the business model for media. So prior to the internet taking off using broadband, which I would argue was 99 to 2002 or thereabouts, the mainstream media had a good thing going. I mean, there was no, Craigslist didn't destroy the classified ads market. Google hadn't really taken off. Facebook didn't really exist. And so they had a situation where the editors and the owners of the big media could really, spike a story or give prominence to a story.
Right.
And it was a very happy situation where the mainstream media loves globalism, right? They love people to fly all over the world and do all this kind of stuff. And they love the access to all the government leaders. Meanwhile, there are 200 major countries in the world, roughly. All those people want to be on television. Certainly all the Americans want to be on TV, the big politicians. So you've got this great thing going where, you can help a Lindsey Graham, become a celebrity by being on all the Sunday shows. That helps him raise more money.
He's not coming on this Sunday show.
No. That helps him raise more money so that he can stay in Congress. And all the celebrity lets him, maybe get some investment ideas as well. And so it was a very close situation. Equally, academia fed off that. Back in, say, 1989, the number of students at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, NYU, et cetera, was not that much smaller than it is today. But the number of applicants for spaces is gigantic compared to what it was in 1989 because so many people have gotten richer outside this country. So many dictators' sons and daughters and oligarch sons and daughters and all those kind of people, they want the prestige places. So the balance of power in academia has come to a place where the professors, who most of them have tenure, have ways of making a lot of extra money. Their jobs are secure. Very few jobs are secure, but theirs are secure. They can have a nice, happy, they shape and mold the minds of all these people and provide, in quotes, legitimacy to the anchors who all more or less think the same way. So what's happened here is all of a sudden now, Donald Trump defying the pundits, and we've talked about this before, and it is a little bit of bragging, but I will brag a little bit that on election night I went to sleep before 10, not only because I generally go to sleep early, but because I was sure Trump was going to win. And very few people, I had a lecture from somebody, I won't embarrass the person by putting, let's not put the name out, but lectured me at around noon that day that I should finally just give up and realize that I didn't know what I was talking about. There's no way Trump could ever win, the blue wall, yada yada. And so I enjoyed calling that person who was covering the convention. It was the last call. I made it around 9:45. So what do you think now? Huh? But anyway, it's taken a while for, I think, the mainstream media to realize that they were suckered by the Obama administration, and to a certain extent by the Bush administration.
Well, that's the other interesting thing that I think has been coming up is that, everybody's been talking about Hillary's server and Hillary's involvement and all of this sort of stuff. But now I think we're finally hearing about the possibility that Obama might be implicated in some of these things, specifically the Uranium One Deal and all that. Oh, this is what I found super interesting about that Sessions hearing. Maybe it was Al Franken. They were talking about how when Trump fired Comey, and they were trying to defend Comey, which I don't see really how somebody could do that. But they said, Trump's words were something like he fired Comey over that Russia thing. And everybody, I think, believes that Trump was talking about the Russian collusion with the Trump campaign thing. But what if he was talking about the uranium deal? That's a Russian thing also.
Right. No, I think so much. I mean, I love, the mainstream media still does this, that, there's a phrase for the day and everyone parrots it.
Yeah.
And so as Obama was going out the door, the phrase was, we've had 8 scandal-free years. Now, I mean, that's interesting.
What about Fast and Furious?
I mean, Benghazi and on and on and on. But really what was going on there, which is so dangerous, as people begin to think about Barack Obama's legacy. I remember watching that speech from Springfield, Illinois, or whenever it was, the Democratic National Convention speech in 2004.
Yeah.
That really was, I thought, very movingly delivered. It was a substantive speech.
He was a great speaker.
And it really was. That speech was really good. But you measure the performance versus the promise,
right,
looking back from 2017, and I'm afraid that's only going to get worse. And really what we see, I think, in the IRS scandal with Lois Lerner and others, in the Justice Department scandal with Holder and Lynch, with all these different scandals, we see a few things. The first thing is that there are too many African-American women, in my view, being used as foils. When there's a problem, you trot out Donna Brazile.
Because anybody who says anything against them is a misogynist and a racist.
And that I mean, those are not our values as a nation. I mean, people who believe that America in 2017 is populated by large numbers of people who see life through a racial prism alone are idiots. I mean, that's just not. And I think there's a guy I saw this morning on Fox and Friends. There was a guy who I think either was or is the CEO of NPR. And he's got a book out where he was, diehard anti-Republican, liberal type. And he decided after Trump won to take time off and travel the country. And this book is revelatory. I mean, he's like, I don't believe that I, thought the way I used to think. And it's quite interesting that when you get out of the Hamptons and Manhattan and Los Angeles and the big cities, and you travel across this country, people have moved far past the segregated days, the days of intense, racial bigotry, far past that to a much better place where people are valued, for what they accomplish. And people who fall down, who need help for whatever reason, truly are helped. I mean, it's not like we don't spend any money in this country and devote any resources to trying to help the afflicted. We really do that.
Is this Jarl Mann? Is that the guy's name?
Huh?
Jarl Mann, is that?
No, I think it's something like, it's not. It's a different guy.
Maybe that's the new CEO.
No, it's the old one. The book was just came out today. It's something like.
Oh, I see. Here he is, Ken Stern.
That's it. Yeah, Ken Stern.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll have to look into that.
Yeah. So maybe we should rip through some of these.
Yeah, sure.
So Eutrease Lead is a treasure. Not only because she puts up with me like you do, but she's really somebody who, if you had asked me in 2000, well, I should say 1989, whether I would ever spend time with somebody who at one point was the station manager of WBAI here in New York, which is a pretty far left-leaning radio station, and was, I've actually told Eutrease this, and I won't use the word on air, but my son's first sentence was in reaction to my ex-wife listening to that radio station on the weekend. and I can't, this is literally his first sentence. He's in a high chair, and we had a detente in our apartment and house that I wouldn't listen to Howard Stern if she wouldn't listen to WBAI. And so I come down the stairs, there's WBAI on it. I want to say it's in '89, and it's a bunch of Russian professors who are visiting the United States, talking to some CCNY professors. And these Russians are trying to explain to the CCNY communists that communism really doesn't work. And the Americans are saying, no, it works in theory. It just didn't work in practice in Russia. We should try it here in America. And the Russians are saying, no. If my son's listening to this, he's beaming, and he looks at me and he says to my ex-wife, "Turn that S off." That was his first sentence.
Wow, amazing.
And I told Eutrease that story. She laughed hysterically. But anyway, Eutrease has been having me on her show on Progressive Radio Network for hours and hours and hours, starting in about May of 2016. Now, Eutrease is somebody who's just defies classification. She's from, I think, Trinidad and Tobago originally, and she came here as a young person, thinking that she'd go to college, university, at a very below the age at which we generally, and they didn't allow her to do that, and she made her way, and she became a radio host and a journalist, and she has this thing, Lead Stories, and she's been dogging the issue of the Clinton Foundation and now the Obama Foundation. So she had me on, and this was, I think, the day that Chuck Grassley began his, or announced that he was going to, just as we were more or less doing this, between 1 and 2 New York time, PM, right after that, I think Grassley announced that he was going to go full bore into this whole issue of Russian collusion. And the next day...
But it's important that we mention it's Russian collusion with the Obama administration and the Clinton State Department, not the Trump campaign.
Right. So the real there's a couple of big tensions here as we think about what Russian collusion means. I mean, the Clintons like to think about everything in terms of political terms, right? Is this good for me or bad for me politically? The real concern, and you can get this crowdsourced for yourself if you go on the Podesta, the WikiLeaks State Department file, and you organize it to get a search result with nothing searched, no subject, and you do it in terms of the oldest emails first. You'll get a chronological listing, and you'll see there's an article highlighted among the very first things that Hillary gets, is an article focusing in by a supposed academic on how much money the State Department spends on private contracting and how that number has soared from 2002 under Bush. And so the Clintons right away perceived that being on top, in my view, of the decisions in the State Department, how the massive bloated State Department budget, how that money gets spent on no-bid contracts. So they knew right away what they were going to do and once Hillary got confirmed. And it's high time, past time, that ChuckGrassley and others look at that and look at the actual State Department budget. Why did billions go missing in the end? Why was there no Inspector General? It's a big money pit, the State Department and other branches of the government. So you get an unscrupulous politician, dare I say crook, like Hillary Clinton and the crooks around her, who get in on the inside, defang the Inspector General, make sure there is no Inspector General in the State Department, and then proceed to throw money out around the world. There's no governance of that. There's no checking. And so Eutrease has been onto that, and also onto the idea that it's not like the Clintons ran the country. I mean, Barack Obama was president of the United States. He had to know a lot more than so far he's being tagged with. I mean, no one has yet gotten to the bottom of, if Hillary had a private server, did Valerie Jarrett have a private server? Did Barack Obama have a private server? Did Eric Holder have a private server? How many alias email accounts were there? You know, how many defiances have there been of the Freedom of Information Act request, which makes a mockery if you're not going to actually respond to the Freedom of Information Act? So why do we have a media?
You know, these inspector generals, like, how do we know that any of them have any credibility? I went last week in San Diego to see Teresa Grafenstein and ask her, you know, for 14 years you were there, Inspector General's office, the House of Representatives. Imran Awan was there the whole time. How did you allow this to happen? And she basically said, well, she investigated it for a year and turned over her information and then resigned.
She said, I don't know what happened.
She doesn't know what happened. She probably read that book, or she needs to read that book.
Well, she can't write a book if she didn't know what happened.
Yeah, you can write a book.
Second thought.
What happened? But seriously, I mean, it seems to me, everybody's going to say, well, not everybody watching this, but everyone who doesn't agree with this is going to say, oh, you don't like Hillary Clinton, you're a misogynist, whatever. That's not true. I didn't know anything about Hillary Clinton when she first showed up. I saw her on TV when Bill was the president, and I thought she was fine. It was in reading all this information and watching all these videos, Clinton Chronicles and all Peter Schweizer's stuff, Clinton Cash and all that, that I found out what they did. But it just seems so clear to me that their MO is to go in wherever they are, whether it's Bill as the State Attorney General of Arkansas, they control the Attorney General, they control the investigator, they control the coroner, and we're seeing that now in Las Vegas, the coroner's office on lockdown, the police standing outside the coroner's office, the FBI standing right next to the police, the FBI guy on the hot mic says, don't go there. Like, there's all this control being exerted over these things that are supposed to have checks and balances over other things. It seems like the Clintons, they know how the government works inside and out. They're lawyers. They know how the law works inside and out. And they're not stupid. They're dismantling these systems and controlling the key weak spots to be able to carry out this insane crime spree for 3 decades or more.
Yeah, it's a disaster. Well, so Eutrease is very helpful. She asks good questions. She had me on for that hour on that day, and then the next day we were only on for 50 minutes. But in this part 2, I try to listen to some of the broadcasts just so I can learn from what I said, and maybe improve. Not make
even you learn.
I always try to learn stuff. That's my motto. I try to learn at least one thing every day.
From yourself?
No, certainly not for myself. But in this case, I went back and I listened to this, and if you could only listen to one of these two, I would listen to this one. Not only because it's 10 minutes shorter, but it was great fun. We get into a lot of different things here.
And I'll include these links in the description at the end.
Thank you. And so then if you go to the next one, now this is, we're going to have Lionel on. You can see he's got 32,000 views from this one.
That's great.
And Lionel has agreed to come on. We just have to schedule him.
If you're not subscribed to Lionel, go there, Lionel Nation.
He's really doing well, and he's does a lot of broadcasting. He's won an Emmy, actually.
Lionel's fantastic.
Yeah. So props to you, Lionel. And then the next one, this is the great Richard Pollack of the Daily Caller. This story is a major story.
Podfather's story.
Yeah, so, and really when you look, as I think that crowdsourcers could benefit from going back into the other WikiLeaks, the Podesta dump, and maybe the Secretary of State dump, and start to look more specifically at the various projects that Podesta and the hangers-on were trying to get financed and done. I mean, there's a reason that these green energy people were financing Hillary Clinton. That there are all sorts of deals, the Cylindras, the other kinds of deals.
What was the reason?
The reason was if you put $100,000 to pick a number into, say, the Democratic Party one way or another, or the Republican Party, and the person you back is in a position of power, they can arrange, in certain cases, to give you under Obama gigantic no-bid contracts,
right? $1
contracts,
right?
Wherein you can make big money off your $100,000 donation, and that whole calculation, there's no regulation of it. It's too complicated for the average schmo to get involved with it. Most of the people down in the regulatory capital in Washington, D.C. are married to other people, or in partnership with other people, or have friends and relatives.
Literally married.
Yeah, so it's very incestuous. And the swamp, is not going to burn itself out. You really need to have the crowdsourcers can help a lot in this. But this story is significant because Juul Unlimited, which is the company in question, was backed by the Russians. And there are many, many other companies that John Podesta and his brother Tony Podesta and prominent Democrats and prominent Republicans got involved with that were backed under the Obama years by billions and billions and billions of our tax money, really of our borrowing capacity, during a period where Barack Obama and Congress, ran the total U.S. government debt up to like $20 trillion, which is some serious cake. It's a lot of money.
It's interesting to me, Charles, because so much of this stuff that's coming out in the past week is stuff that you and I and George and other people that we have on the show have been talking about for like almost a year. So it doesn't seem like news to me. It's sort of like, oh, finally. What did you think about this revelation? I don't know, what was it, yesterday, that Mueller is going to investigate Podesta?
Well, yeah, I mean,
it seems like a non-investigation. Mueller was involved in this whole scandal.
I think what's happening, and we're going to get into it in a bit, I think what's happening is the appetite to investigate has suddenly expanded, where there was no appetite. All of a sudden, I think people are realizing one important thing, which is, beyond the fact that Trump's in town and Trump's going to stay,
the new sheriff,
is that the head of the IRS is replaced on November 12th. Two Sundays from now, but his term is up. John Koskinen, and things are going to change. In this situation here, we're not talking about a super complicated case in the real Russian scandal here. We're talking about a Secretary of State, a president who, in a hot mic moment in 2012, says, after the election to Medvedev, I'll have more flexibility.
Right.
And, a disastrous set of foreign policies, frankly, under the Hillary and Obama 8 years and under the Bush 8 years. And it's not too complicated to see that on the one hand, you have a dead broke couple, by their own admission, heavily in debt on January 20th, 2001, now having earned over or close to $250 million declared dollars somehow,
Doesn't she seem so uneasy in that interview where she's like, well, I mean, you wouldn't know we were broke. And it's like, that's just lying right there.
Yeah, exactly. Larry David, I don't know about that. But, yeah, so if we could just go perhaps to the next one.
Sure.
So this is just out. 2 different House committees, I think it's Oversight and Intelligence, are now actually going to look at this. And Oversight, I believe, has Trey Gowdy, I think, is either on it or chairing that committee.
That should be good. But
yeah.
He kind of, didn't he say he was leaving Congress or something? And
all the better.
Why?
All the better. If he's leaving and he has no, no re-election campaign, then it means it's tougher to eat. But, I can tell you one thing. This is one of the stories that I think I might have had some hand in breaking last week. When you look at the Clinton Foundation filings for the period where supposedly 145 million went into the Clinton Foundation, there is no such set of numbers in the Clinton Foundation books. Now, the Clinton Foundation books don't yet disclose totals by donor. But what they do have to disclose is and the Clintons made a mistake, actually, on their website, yeah, and they can't remedy the mistake of putting the aggregate sums that large donors, i.e. donors that gave 2% or more, the names are not on the Schedule Bs that are on their website, but the amounts are. And so you can go year by year, and there is no set of numbers that would add up to as much as 145 million in the Schedule Bs that are made public. So, the one thing, the message to the incoming IRS and to the team that may be looking at this, the IRS and the Justice Department and others, the IRS has already the identities of all the donors. They have it. The Clinton Foundation has to file with the IRS versions of their forms that list the name and the address of these major donors. So they already know what and have known since all the way back to when Comey and others and Mueller started investigating this in 2001. They have known the specific identities of all the donors. They have been in a position to do what I've been doing and you've been doing from the outside, and they haven't done it. So a set of questions here, it's not simply what was this Russian deal? It's when did you know about the Russian deal in the FBI, in the oversight committees, in the apparatus of the IRS, in the Justice Department? When did you know about this, and who decided not to go after it? Why does it take so long to get to the bottom of what happened with this, with the financial crisis? Who was behind that? There were no major individual scalps, really, over what happened from 2007 to 9 with the Ron-Boxy and the bigger drug problem, the opioid problem and the failure to control drugs. There are no scalps yet.
That was another big story that came out while I was in California, was that a DEA official said that the pharmaceutical industry and the Congress created this opioid crisis.
Yeah, I mean, that going back to this academia thing, when you look at in the medical profession, I know your father, I believe, is a doctor, so you probably have had more than enough exposure to the whole medical profession. And it's tough to be a doctor. Tough to get into medical school. It's tough to graduate from medical school. It's tough to pay the insurance to be a doctor and And when you look inside this country, the population of students in the top medical schools is not that high. I want to say that Harvard and Yale and the best schools are very few graduates per year in these top schools. Yet they're gigantic endowments, gigantic hospitals operating around these universities. Why is it that there's so few doctors? Maybe there should be more doctors.
It's hard.
Well, not just inside this country, but around the world. Doctors flock to where the opportunities, in theory, may be. So you train somebody from Zimbabwe who's a really smart person. They don't go back to Zimbabwe because there's no hospitals there to speak of, and there's no infrastructure. So, that's another side point. Anyway, so this happened today, and then this is an article that arose out of the great Ekaterina Blinova, who is an independent journalist based, I'm not even sure where exactly inside Russia, I forget the name of the city.
Undisclosed location.
Well, no, she's a brilliant historian, a trained historian who also writes for this organization Sputnik. And so basically what she has been doing over now many months, she has some ideas, she'll send me a list of questions, I provide answers to those questions, which are my opinion, and then she creates a story. Well, the most recent story that she did ended up being picked up by Zero Hedge, and it's got, I think, over 30,000 views. It only went up less than 24 hours ago. It's a bit further down, I'll tell you the views. I want to say it's got like 35,000, or it should be right there, 41,000.
Wow, nice.
And that's in less than 24 hours. I think
that's just here on Zero Hedge. What about on Sputnik? Sputnik,
it doesn't have quite as many. Zero Hedge has a big following. But to get 40,000 on a Zero Hedge following, pretty good. Sputnik's down at, I think, only 2,500, but that's a lot.
Yep.
And she does very, very good work. She and her team, I found, actually, what she'll do is she'll ask me some questions, and then she goes off with her team, and they research and have different angles. This one is pretty heavily weighted on me, but another one has got other people's perspectives in. And anyway, the next thing, Sean Hannity doesn't need an introduction. But I'll tell you, this thing from last night is 21 minutes long, 22 minutes long, and it is a must. I don't know if this is the whole one. You may have to, I see it's only 3 minutes. But the one from, I didn't send you the right link. There's a YouTube link that's 21 minutes long. And then the Newt Gingrich thing, I think I sent you the link to that after this one. Both of these are must watch and read. They're fantastic.
Newt is a weird name.
Yeah, you got to wonder about his parents, right? I think I'll name my child Newt. At least I didn't name him I.
Newt I?
I of Newt.
I of Newt, yeah. Right.
Anyway, so then the next, and I think last one, this is the one that just moments ago came out on Sputnik.
Oh, our favorite guy.
Yeah. And this is, Katrina has done another piece, an earlier piece.
They do find good photos of these people.
Yeah, I don't know where they do. But this is only just up moments ago. The time that's shown there is Russian time.
He's seeking to impose more control on U.S. media platforms over Russia's alleged meddling in the 2016. See, now they've shifted the story kind of away from Trump's colluded with them, and now they're saying that they bought ads on Facebook or whatever.
You'll like my quote there.
John McCain should concentrate upon his own health problems. His suggestion is loopy. That's good. I mean, don't you think that's the case, though, Charles, that they're now trying to focus on, they bought ads to influence the election? So shouldn't Russia be allowed to buy ads? That's not subversive, is it? An ad it's an open market. If they want to put up an ad that says, hey, Hillary Clinton sold us all the uranium, maybe you should vote for Trump.
Well, I think, in the case of, first of all, we need to take a gigantic step back. I mean, there's the old adage, people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. And,
right. What about Media Matters for America? How are they manipulating social media?
Or what about Voice of America? I mean,
right. The radio station.
For how many decades was beaming across Radio Free Europe and all that kind of stuff. Right. I mean, I think we need to have a balanced view here. And what I would say, going back to the opening in your question at the very beginning, is that ads don't really influence, much as Facebook and Google would like to have us believe that their ads really influence behavior. I think what's happening in America is that people are beginning to think more for themselves. And while, yes, on the traditional Coke versus Pepsi kind of decision, you could argue maybe the constant barrage of advertisements does lead to impulse purchasing. But, in the main, as our population has aged, I think preferences set in. I think that, to argue, as I'm sure Facebook and Google would like to argue, that these advertisements, really are what drive human behavior, when perhaps we make up our mind and we decide, I just really don't like Pepsi. I don't like it. You can change the formulation. I'm not going to drink Pepsi. I like Coke.
Right.
And I think in the political land, the way that you know, that area works is the consultants are compensated, I understand, by getting a slice of the money that is spent on advertising. So they're always saying, you know, I don't have any conflict here. It's just that I get 15% of the ad budget. So why don't you spend, you know, 100 million on advertisement so I can make my 15 million? I mean, I think there's an incestuous argument. And we look at Trump. I mean, Trump, you know, he's a marketing genius, right? I mean, he used Twitter very effectively. I think other international leaders also used Twitter effectively, but he really dominated. He got tremendous amounts of free advertising off the networks,
right,
and the mainstream. And to say that, you know, a Facebook ad or a Google ad is the reason that Trump won, when, you know, we had the swan dive, 9/11, 2016, we had the famous Greg Louganis swan dive into the cement, you know, which didn't exactly project leadership. We had, you know, I think I'll go off on my first or second start of the tour. I'll rent a Scooby-Doo van and go into a Chipotle wearing, you know, sunglasses and not having. I mean, it just.
Did she go to Chipotle?
She went to Chipotle
for lunch,
and she didn't have any cash, so, you know, Uma paid for it.
Wow.
And I mean, you know, that just doesn't send a strong message. And, you know, then the ridiculous picture of her carrying her own suitcase, you know.
She's swindling Uma at the Chipotle. She's just always on the take.
Non-stop.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so this is something that just came out. There are going to be a few more stories out of this great journalist who I commend. She's a wonderful human being. I've never met her, but she's a wonderful writer and does some great work. So I don't know if we have any more. Or
no, that was it for the articles that you sent over.
Good. So maybe we should go into the slides quickly to.
Sure. We can do that.
So this is now the official previewing of our Sunday for Charles.
Oh, sorry. So wait, you know what's going to make it easier so that you can see it is if I just do it like this. What's going on here? I'm not sure what happened, Charles. Hang on one second.
That's all right.
There we go.
Catching my breath. There we go. All right.
There you go. So,
Walking Tall, for those of you who don't know the movie, there have been two versions that I know of. One in 1973 and another in 2004. And basically the quick plot summary, and this is all a fictional movie, but I think it might be based on real life, is there was a small town, I think he was a sheriff or person in some state, where the insiders basically ruined his life, ruined his family, etc. And he went back to that town, I think having served possibly time in prison, and ended up running for sheriff and cleaning up the town. And so that's where I think, that's what the American people, I believe, the Berniacs, the Trump supporters, both want to see those who administer government pushed into a place of really exposing the magnitude of the fraud and then going back after the people who've been defrauding we the people now for almost 30 years, starting in 1989.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about this in depth on this forthcoming Sunday at 3 o'clock. And we can maybe move to the next page. And there he is, Donald Trump, walking tall in Walking Tall 3.
That worked out well with the head sticking on there.
It did,
right?
it did. It's very well done. Are you by chance a graduate of the NYU Film School?
Yeah.
So you know how to do this?
They didn't teach me that there.
All right, well done. Anyway, so what we will be doing now is giving sort of a short summary of this forthcoming attraction. Then live at 3 p.m., what we're going to be doing is going through tons of slides, but a number of slides pitched to the general audience, not for the professional, not for the people who are very comfortable with the legal side and the accounting side. We'll spend an hour or so on that, but we hope to give you a good sense of, you know, what's going on, what is really happening, and why we are in a great place, I think, to see the swamp get drained, to see tax reform happen, all because Donald Trump has a chance here to walk tall through Washington, D.C., through the heartland, and motivate these politicians, these crooked politicians, either to leave, as now Jeff Flake You know, somebody
just today announced that.
Moments ago, he's not going to stand for re-election in Arizona.
Arizona, right.
And I've actually had the pleasure of speaking with Kelly Ward at length. And she is she's a doctor, a very smart person. She got destroyed by McLean in the last primary, and of course he won. But I think she could walk in as the next senator from Arizona, which would be wonderful.
So you feel like we're in a good position now for the swamp to start draining?
As I will explain in a second. But,
okay.
But in the bonus podcast on Sunday, which is more pitched to regulators, to government authorities, to people who email me and say, all right, where's the meat? Show me the tables and show me the numbers. All right, let's talk a little bit about the business model for charity fraud. You know, business model in quotes. And I've said on this broadcast before, the Clinton Foundation operates as Robin Hood in reverse, or Rodham Hood in reverse. And so I want to just take a few seconds here and go step by step how this actually works. If we start on step one, generally speaking, there'll be a cry for there's some set of victims that needs help. It's HIV/AIDS people. It's the climate. It's an earthquake. It's a flood. It's some war refugees or poverty. There's always a reason for people to reach into their wallets. So the first step is you find that reason,
or create it.
Yeah, and then the next step is you defang the controls, much as they defanged the controls in Arkansas, and then while Bill was president, and then while Hillary was Secretary of State. You pick a charity and you defang the controls. What does that mean? You put in crooked insiders as the trustees, in quotes. You put in a crooked accounting firm. You put in professional advisors who stand to milk this thing and believe they're never going to get caught. So that's step two. All right, and the step three is you collect a gigantic amount of money. Because when you're talking about HIV/AIDS, when you're talking about Haiti, when you're talking about the earthquake in Gujarat, you know, there are a lot of people who will think nothing. I mean, instead of buying some mocha choco, whatever it is, frappiato at Starbucks, they'll send $5 or even $10 or $20 over PayPal or some other way on the internet into an account that is associated with such a charity. And presto changeo, you get 10 to 13 billion for Haiti. You get who knows how much for the HIV/AIDS stuff. Who knows how much is going to come into all these different things. And then the fourth step is that you get, and it's not probably Bill Clinton and Hillary and Chelsea sitting there, checking their PayPal balance and saying, all right, well, we got 16 billion. How much should we? There's probably people are 1 or 2 or 3 steps removed from that, who are probably stealing from themselves. A whole bunch of crooks are all stealing from one another. One crook will say, guess what, boss? We got 15 billion, and the real number is 20 billion. So that one set of crooks will steal from the next set, who will steal from the next set, and then ultimately a much smaller amount of money will end up in the real charity, with the balance being sent into international accounts, undeclared domestic accounts, gems, real estate, art, whatever. So that's now step 4. Step 5 is you declare the small, you decide, all right, out of the 10 billion that came in, or the 15 billion, why don't we say we raised 800 million? That's a lot of money. So you say, all right, 800 million, good for you. 800 million, that's what, going once, going twice, 800 million goes into the official charity books. And that's what you put in the IRS form, that's what you put in your state filings, your foreign filings. And then comes step 2. Now, you stole the most money in the first few steps. Step 2, if you got a crooked charity, you said 800 million went into it, and now let's say we spend 760 million. What do we spend it on? Well, we'll get a crooked travel agent to send us a bill for 100 million. We'll get a crooked construction company to send us a bill for 300 million. And, we'll have deals with those companies that we're actually only going to give the travel company 20 million, and then we'll carve up the difference. Same idea for the construction. You have ghost employees, you have, padded bills. And no real trustees. Everyone's in on the game. Everyone's stealing a little bit of the money. And you have the IRS game, because you got Lois Lerner in there, and you've got various and sundry other people who are never going to flip the switch and say, this is a fraud, and now we're going to go after it. So it's one.
Looks like never has arrived.
Never may well have arrived. And so then you think about, all right, this is the actual monetary side. So then beyond the books of the charity, if you set up this so-called Clinton Global Initiative, convening sessions at resorts here or fancy hotels here in New York, then at several international locations at fancy resorts, you charge people, you know, a taxi fare, 20 grand or something, to go to the conference. And you marry up, the business model that they use is you marry up, the people who want to put deals together, who may have money to invest, but they don't have connections in Democratic Republic of the Congo. So you say to the leader of that country, come on into the conference. You close doors to outsiders, and there, under the guise of charity, are all these different deals. And here the Clintons have made a massive error, in my judgment. It's fortunate for us, I think, that they did this. They bragged, and they have online, and it's on the Wayback Machine, and you can't get it off now. They made a list of all their projects. And I swear to God, you know, if somebody, let's say, wanted to gain weight, what you would do is you might go out to Colorado, purchase some marijuana, have a whole bunch of munchies ready to go, and have a party where you could sit around looking at these ridiculous projects that they say that they did with crooked firms like Siemens and many other suspect characters around the world. The projects are laughable. They're not charity. None of them have been accounted for properly. No one knows where the money really went. Many of them involve scams where the people who participated in them asserted a lofty purpose, but in reality were just using the Clintons to get supercharged money out of the World Bank, out of the International Finance Corporation, out of the U.S. government itself, or state governments. And so none of these brokered deals in Step 7 have adequately been explained as was required in the foundation documents. None of them. And they've hid all of what are called related party transactions. In a foundation, what you're required to do is decide who the significant people are in the foundation. It's not simply the trustees and the executives. It can be significant donors. It can be people who don't actually have official titles if they're in a position to exercise significant influence over the foundation. And Bill at all times was such a person. By extension, Hillary was, Chelsea was, in-laws by marriage were, grandparents, grandchildren, you know, it's a wide web of people. And anybody who derived not simply cash, but an advantage, a competitive edge out of the operation of this charity is supposed to explain all that in forms that do need to be filled out, but have never been filled out properly for any of the Clinton charities. So that's Step 8. And here we're talking, that's where you get, you know, the declared amounts in the charity are $2 billion or so. That's how you mushroom into the hundreds of billions, because the transactions we're talking about here, many of them are gigantic. Then what you do, we talked about this earlier, is the regulatory process. I would argue the entire regulatory process in this country, the SEC, which regulates markets, and FINRA, the FDA, the FCC, the FTC, all these operations, the IRS,
they've been compromised.
They've all, I would submit, been compromised. And instead of being, you know, a place, unfortunately, where the scales of justice are even, and where potential defendants and decisions to prosecute are rendered neutrally, I think we've become a country, and I think the evidence is out there and obvious, that if you're politically connected, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, either you get a benefit, only you get a benefit you shouldn't get in exchange for contributing, or in addition, you're not prosecuted to the full extent of the law because you're too important, or, you know, you're in politics, or, you know, you've served the country over so many decades, or your family has done all that. And I think that's why Congress has a 10% approval rating. That's why Trump won. It has nothing to do with Facebook ads.
Hashtag lock her up.
Exactly. So the question here, it's obvious this is the Clinton way. That's obvious from the record, the known record. The question is it also the Carter, Bush 1 and 2, and Obama way? And here we have an instant case in point in your next slide. We have this One America appeal, and there's a picture of the five amigos. And they have launched an appeal, and I think they've already broken the law, and I'll tell you why.
Jimmy Carter too?
Well, I don't know. Jimmy Carter is one of those people that, and I have to say, when he was president, I found him to be one of the most annoying human beings on the planet. And since then, you know, there have been moments in time where I've wondered about his sanity. But you know, recently his comments to the New York Times, to Maureen Dowd when you were flying back, were, I think, quite positive. And of the 5 foundations that are out there, I'm certain the Clinton Foundation is an epic fraud. I'm certain that the Obama Foundation is not authorized currently to raise money for an earthquake, and hurricanes or whatever. It's not authorized for that purpose at all. I believe that the HW and W foundations tried to do it more correctly. Instead of raising money for tsunami, and then for Katrina, and then for Gulf Coast recovery, HW's foundation worked with something called a Community Development Foundation. I want to say his was in Houston, or it might have been, his was in Houston. And there are lots of these community development foundations that are set up just for this purpose, so that if there is a tragedy in a broadly defined community, you can raise money from the public to provide relief. All right, so I think in regards to tsunami, Katrina, and Gulf Coast recovery, HW's foundation, working with Bill Clinton, either with a foundation or personally, tried to do it the correct way. They failed, though. Bill, on the other hand, was so far off base and has done it wrong so many different times. He's not deplorable, he's irredeemable in this one. Then you get to the question, and W tried, W's foundation was involved with Haiti, and Haiti is an epic disaster.
W was an epic disaster.
Well, in W's case, the paperwork for that foundation was better, but it was better doesn't cut it. It's either correct or it's incorrect, and it's incorrect. Small amounts relative to the many billions that Bill raised in side pockets, not connected to W. But then you turn to our former peanut farmer from Georgia. He actually has raised a fair amount of money in his foundation legally, and he did a smart thing, two smart things. He created, there's a Carter Library, and then there's the Carter Center, which are separate entities, and all the other four should have done that. Presidential Library is something that holds presidential records. It's not something that holds, the many things that Bill Clinton couldn't store in a house because he never owned one while he was president.
Strip clubs and restaurants.
Strip club medals and pictures and whatever. That's not a presidential library. It's not if Jason becomes president or Charles becomes president and suddenly we have 45 rooms worth of stuff, that we're keeping in a storage, facility. You can't, that's not what the presidential library is supposed to store. The presidential library stores the records, the presidential records, the official government records, so that scholars can study that. That's what it's for. Anyway, Carter seems to come closest to getting things done the right way. And I haven't in depth gone through Carter's papers. I will do that. He also set up a Carter Center in the UK, a separate entity, validly under UK law. These other four, I guess think they don't have to play by the rules.
Now, Charles, let me ask you something about this photograph. So just look at the countenance on each of their faces. It looks like HW, W, and Bill are extremely happy to be there. Jimmy Carter, not so much. He's physically separated from the other four men. He looks like he's got about 40 years worth of pissed off on his face. He's got to hate H.W. Bush. Iran-Contra was H.W. Bush's scheme that he cooked up in part to push out Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I guess there's probably no love lost. I actually, of the presidents up there, the only person I've spent any time with is Carter. And that was when I was in college. There was a great...
Really?
Yeah, I lived in a residential college. There were 12 different residential colleges at Yale, and one of them had something called the Chubb Fellowship, which was the insurance company.
Oh, yeah.
And what they would do is they would give an honorarium to aspiring politicians, former world leaders, and you get paid a certain small amount of money, but you then live in our dorm, for 2 or 3 days.
Jimmy Carter was your roommate?
Well, he wasn't my roommate, but so I get a call.
Did you make him clean the
toilets? No. So what? I get a call. We had like the former president of this country, Ted Heath, the Prime Minister of England. Some pretty amazing people went through there. So I get a call, I want to say in my sophomore year, and from a friend, and said, "Yeah, Charles, we got a horrible problem. There's a breakfast tomorrow morning. No one will go to it. Will you go to breakfast?" I said, "I don't get up that early in the morning. You got to be kidding me. I'm 19 years old, right?
Yeah.
I don't do that. Oh, you got to come." So I decided I'd do it. So I sat next to Jimmy Carter and like 2 other people when he was just beginning to think about, I believe, running or maybe running.
Wow.
And
what did he have for breakfast?
I forget, but he was, I mean, it was...
Fruit Loops?
Yeah, no, he's actually, in theory, a reasonably intelligent person, but he was uninspiring, to put it mildly. Anyway, the final slide, what we're going to do here, if we can maybe shrink that a little bit, these are two interesting quotes. In my time off, when I retired in July of 2002, one of the first things I did, other than work closely with my children, was to do a lot of reading, a lot of history. And I encountered some brilliant people from the past. The quote about facts is John Adams. And people always hear this quote at the beginning of it, facts are stubborn things. That's what you hear people say, but not the balance of the quote. And I commend the balance of the quote to the audience. Whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Message to the Clintons. You can try, but with a charity, unfortunately, particularly a public charity, which is what the Clinton Foundation is, you can't alter the public record because it's too big. And there's too many versions of what you said in too many places that too many people still have. And so it's one of these things where you want to lie about it. If no one's going to really investigate, you can maybe get away with lying.
Right.
But not when we start looking at the record, which is well along. Then, the one on the right, at his best, man is the noblest of all animals. Separated from law and justice, he is the worst. It is from a fellow who is quite old, Aristotle. And I think that's a wonderful quote. Of those ancient Greeks in particular, and other very wise people, were able to lay down big concepts in short sentences that really resonate for me. So what we're going to be doing starting this Sunday is we're going to be focusing on the real facts and the real laws. And what's going to happen out of this, what's very different for the first time in all these broadcasts we've been doing and all the work that I've been doing since February of 2015, for the first time in history, the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas may not hold control over the levers of power. And there's a big deadline coming up at midnight on the 15th of November 2017. And so we've set up this little countdown thing, which I'd love to get the Crowdsource the Truth people to circulate. If you can, I don't know if you can hit it.
It's going on this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a pretty. I changed it from the one that you did because the deadline is actually midnight. Well, no, they had an opportunity to make it be tax day, and so that's what I did. And we're going to count down to November 15th, 2017. And I have a message now. If any professionals, lawyers, accountants, trustees, executives, and their legal advisors are listening to me right now, you want to be very careful what you do between now and this deadline, because you are on notice, you have been on notice that this is a fraud.
The lawyers, accountants, and trustees of the Clinton Foundation.
Of the Clinton Foundation, of all the affiliated charities. This is a massive fraud. And let me tell you one thing we're going to get into some depth on. I'm not going to show you the actual words and everything. Let me tell you one little thing that you may not know, you trustees.
A tidbit?
A little tidbit, a little morsel. The Clinton Foundation entered into an agreement on the 18th of November 2004, which it has assiduously tried to hide from the public. You trustees, especially you rich ones, Mr. Heinz Saban's wife, and the several centimillionaires and billionaires who are on the boards, and the big law firms. You want to get a copy of this joint use and operating agreement. And you want to look specifically at the recitals and the agreements. And one in particular that calls for requires for the life of this presidential archive, requires it to be a 509A1 public charity, publicly supported entity. You cannot be a 509A1 public charity if in November of 2013 you change the governance structure using the bylaws to one in which only a Clinton family member exercises control. You're not a public charity when you do that, the second you did that. And you did do that. Maybe they didn't tell you that before you agreed to become a trustee, but you did do that. And then the three people named originally were Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea as Class A directors. Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea. Maybe they also didn't tell you in 2015 when Hillary was getting ready to, when she announced that she was going to seek the nomination, maybe they didn't tell you that Hillary didn't remove, or her name wasn't removed as a Class A trustee until 5 months into campaigning, raising money. They withheld that information from the general public, and here in New York, where the rules are very strict, until June 27, 2017. So just for that one thing there, you go ahead and you file a tax return with the IRS, and then in all the states where you have to file it, internationally where you have to file it, you know that this is a fraud. And the numerical problems in this record are so vast. I've had accountants now look at this with me and confirm my suspicions. We'll be going into this at the general interest level, 3 p.m. Sunday, this forthcoming Sunday at 29th of October 2017, general interest level. And then for you experts out there who may want to question what I have to say, feel free to do that, because I question what I have to say before I start talking, and I've done a lot of work on this. I would also point out to those of you who don't yet know me well, particularly those who are trustees and professional advisors and others, you may want to look at some of the work I did on General Electric, and you may want to look at, this is back in 2007, at what's going on with General Electric right now. And then ask yourself, is General Electric more complicated than the Clinton Foundation? Because I'll tell you the answer to that question is no.
Gotta be.
It's no. General Electric is far more complicated than the Clinton Foundation. And so this is a fraud. Those of you who are still trustees, those of you who are advising this fraud, those of you who are prepared to look the other way, you're going to have to ask yourselves, how many government investigations are already in progress? We know about some in Congress. We know in the House and in the Senate. Might there be other investigations internationally? Do you really want to trust the word of the chief financial officer of the Clinton Foundation who began work? Probably he would, if he thought about this, he wouldn't have started on April 1st, 2004, but do you really want to trust his word?
Well, you know what, here's what I would say about joint use agreements. As far as Bill Clinton is concerned, I think he's exempt because he didn't inhale.
No, the joint use and operating agreement is a document that is purposefully, one of many, purposefully not on the Clinton Foundation website, which is a very material document. And there are other documents. I will be sharing the names, and we'll be providing links actually on Sunday, so that the people who are out there trying to consider this record can consider the whole picture. What the Clintons are masters and mistresses at doing is getting around something that's very complicated and then saying, all right, you guys, we'll give you the information. It's right over here. Except the information is all the way over here.
Well, that's misdirection.
Right, and on the basis of what they show you, you think it's okay. But here's the truth over here, and we're going to show you the truth. Why? Because that's kind of what we do at Crowdsource the Truth.
That's right. I have a serious question, Charles. So you spoke about lawyers, accountants, etc. I know a lawyer who was affiliated with the Clinton Foundation. Apparently, he was only in charge of collecting Diet Cola, but is Mr. Chris Gowan on the hook for knowing that this is a fraud if he was a lawyer that worked there?
Again, Newt Gingrich, if you listened to him last night, those of you, when we provided the link,
right.
He is somebody who originally, he'd been through his own scandals, and he was originally sort of downplaying in the very beginning of this how serious this could be. In this interview, I think it's this one or a related one, last night he said that this scandal, in his view, is likely to be the biggest scandal in America's history, far greater than Watergate, far greater than Teapot Dome involving Warren G. Harding, far greater than the Ulysses Grant scandals. This is a massive scandal that involves treason, it involves corruption, it involves fraud, it involves improper operation of numerous government agencies. And the practitioners here are not simply, some rube, Bernie Madoff. You're talking about presidents. You're talking about attorneys general. You're talking about secretaries of state. You're talking about, big fish. And now I think with the fact that we now face this November 15th deadline on the charities, not simply the Clinton Foundation, all the charities, the Obama Foundation, the Bush Foundations, all these big charities have tough decisions to make. when you make a donation and you claim that you gave it to a public charity, but it is proven that it is not a public charity, you have an obligation as the donor to turn yourself in, actually, and notify the IRS and say, whoops, I made a mistake, I want my money back. The other thing, just one quick thing, the foreign governments who've given money here to this fraud, I know why they would have done it. If you're a foreign government like France or the United Kingdom, you're throwing lots of money around, tens of billions of dollars around, to get on the right side of the most powerful country on earth for for 20 million or 30, it's cheap. So you pay off the Clintons, one way using taxpayer money, and next thing you know, you've got America doing your work for you, defending you if you're Australia, let's say, against the Chinese, or helping you out at WHO if you're a Scandinavian country that wants to have more authority there. It's a beautiful scheme, and that's why it's worked the way it's worked. But now what's going to happen here, I can warn again the foreign government leaders around the world, when you have a Chuck Grassley and other committees in the Senate, when you have Trey Gowdy and other committees in the House, when you have the IRS, when you have at least one, if not many, international investigations already going here and a fixed deadline here of November 15th, 2017, and Donald Trump in power and Republicans in control of the House and the Senate, you are literally taking your futures in your hands.
The walls are closing in.
Saying, I'm Australia, I don't care about the 100 million I get. Hey, I'm Norway, I gave 90 million. That's, Australia's a bigger economy.
They were among the first to want the money back, weren't they? Or to stop paying
To stop paying. But it's not enough to just stop paying.
But it does show some degree of knowledge, right? She loses, and then the next day they're like, yeah, stop paying that.
Well, Norway. It's north of Scotland, and the Scottish are pretty cheap, and I guess the Norwegians are even cheaper.
So now let me ask you a serious question. Public charity. How can you determine if something is a public charity versus another kind of private charity?
Yeah, so there are many. The two basic classifications are what's called a private foundation and a public charity. A private foundation, you can only, as a donor, if you're an individual, you can only deduct 30% of your, I think, adjusted gross income on the existing tax rules. But if it's a public charity, i.e. it's supported by the public, and there's a mathematical test where you have to come up with, I think, roughly a third of the donations have to be small and they have to come from the public. And the other thing you have to do when you operate a public charity, it can't be like the Clinton Foundation has now become, where only family members can run the charity. It has to be truly independent. And the reason the Presidential Library had to be truly independent and publicly supported is you're holding the records of the Clintons' years. Those are our public records. You can't just give them to a family. Mm-hmm. They have to be controlled in the Little Rock presidential complex by people who are neutral.
Right.
And so it's not like a little nitpicky question. It's a big question. And if they're so smart, the Clintons and the trustees, they should have figured this out.
Charles, the comments want you to get a bodyguard because we need you to stay safe. And someone else says, bang on, mate, the Scots are cheap.
Good.
Well, anything else you want to cover, Charles, before we wrap up this special Tuesday edition of Sunday with Charles?
Well, the one thing I can tell you is I noticed in the elevator coming up that exactly at the time where we're going to start our Sunday show, there's a costume party in your building for Halloween at 3 p.m. And I can tell you, I don't do that.
You're not going to be wearing a costume?
No.
I think people enjoy your various alter egos.
I'm not doing that.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If people enjoy Sunday with Charles and they enjoy the reporting that we're doing here on Crowdsource the Truth, I would encourage them to become a monthly sponsor on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or to make a one-time sponsorship payment through paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. And of course, Charles, there's a lot of wonderful merchandise available, including things like that lovely mug, the Podfather mug.
And Broyhill carpeting.
Right. You're covering the Podfather.
Sorry.
There you go.
Remember Monty Hall, Let's Make a Deal?
He just died.
I
was surprised to learn he was still alive. He was a very old guy. But thank you for joining me, Charles. We look forward to seeing you again on Sunday. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Jason.